remarks about it by mentioning the fact that we live in an age where talk is a major form of entertainment. And we have talk shows all over the world. And these talk shows are just entertainment and enjoyment that people get from talking. And a lot of that talk is superfluous at best. It is not what is our concern at another level, and then often it's even talk that is harmful and damaging. But these are the kind of cultural parameters that we live in, and therefore they also make us talk. And they make talk for us virtually an essential type of entertainment. And we love to talk, and it's good to talk, and to be good guests and good hosts, we have to talk. But at the same time, we have to be very conscious of what we're saying, and we have to learn to measure our words. We also talked about the phenomenon of hip-hop and rap. There's just talk, 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 constant talk, a stream of talk that never ends. A unique type of music, because usually music will have in it different types of lyrics, and there will be pauses and so forth, but this is talk music. Again, those who perform it, especially in countries like my own, we have a lot of Muslims who are very good in hip-hop and rap. And it's very important for them, and many of them are conscious of that they make this a vehicle for teaching the truth and spreading the truth. Traditional societies, generally speaking, were known for not talking very much. And if little. And they have a whole culture of speaking. If something is very important to them, for example, they may repeat it 3 times. And they don't even say, I'm going to repeat this. They just say it another time, they get the same answer. They say it another time, they get the same answer. They say it another time, they get the same answer, and then that's it. They're satisfied. So again, it's a very interesting culture of verbal exchange. And in Arabian society, like traditional societies in general, it was very important to speak little, and when you speak, to speak with great care and with great thought. Interestingly enough, although we are people who talk so much and we speak thousands of words, our speech is often not very eloquent. Their speech, on the other hand, was generally very eloquent. Again, because they're usually thinking about what they say. So these traditions are important. The Chinese, the classical Chinese, were people who were known for very little words. And they thought carefully about what they spoke. I have a short paper, which you can get on the internet, called Seek Knowledge in China, Thinking Beyond the Abrahamic Box. If you want to look at that article, you may find it very interesting because it tries to summarize the history of Islam in China and the culture of Islam in China, which is a brilliant culture. But part of that article talks about Wan Daiju and Liu Ji, who were among the greatest Muslim scholars of China. And they wrote books that explained Islam in depth to Chinese Muslims, but in light of Chinese traditions, because most of the Muslims of China were part of the imperial system. So they knew the Confucian classics, and they thought like Chinese. They used Chinese. So they explained Islam to Muslims in a way that was intelligible to the Chinese. And there are occasions when Buddhists and Confucianists and others would come to them and become Muslims. And I have an example of that in my paper. Unfortunately, I don't remember that example. But it's amazing because you have, for example, in one case, I think it's the abbot of the Iron Mountain Monastery who comes to one of these, Liu Ji, maybe, and he has only 3 questions. And they're very, very short. And the answers are very, very short. And so then he becomes a Muslim. No big discussion. He's read about it. He's thought about it. He has 3 questions. He puts them very succinctly. He gets extremely succinct answers, and that's all he needs to be convinced. Traditional Muslims regarded the Chinese as people of intellect. They regarded the Indians as people of intellect. Probably when they talk about the Indians, they mean by that the Brahmins. And the Brahmins are definitely people of intellect. They also regarded the Greeks to be people of intellect. And the Arabs themselves in Islamic civilization are masters of intellect. So the way they speak is very, very important. The English used to be known for that too. Maybe not so much today, but it used to be, we would say that the Englishman thinks twice before he speaks. And he speaks to himself first, and then now he'll speak to you. And I've seen that in the old days, and you can still find it among some people today. One of the great teachers and colleagues and friends that I had for many years and still have, Dr. Khaldun al-Ahdab, who is a great Syrian scholar. We taught together in King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah for 16 years. He's one of the most intelligent scholars I've ever seen. And he is a great muhaddith, a great traditional scholar. I would ask him questions, and I used to love to ask him questions because he would put down his head and you could just see him thinking. And he'd think for a long time. And then he gives this extremely dignified, eloquent answer. So you have then both traditions. You have this modern custom of talk, talk, talk. And a lot of that talk is frivolous, and a lot of it is not eloquent, and most of it's probably not even thought out. And then you have traditions in many societies. The First Nations of America, the Native Americans, the American Indians, most of them were like that. They were people known for very little words, but their languages were extremely complex, extremely profound. And these things, again, usually go together. Eloquence and profundity come with people who think about what they speak, think about what they say, and therefore they're very careful about the words that they pick. So Imam al-Ghazali, may Allah be pleased with him, he talks about this matter of superfluous speech and speaking about things that do not concern us. And he cites a great saint of early Islam, Al-Ijli, who said, "There is a certain thing I have been trying to do for 20 years, but I have never been able to do it. But I will never give up trying to achieve it." They asked him, "What is that?" He said, "Being silent about what is not my concern." So he's a great saint, but he said, "I've been working on this for most of my life. But I'll never get it, but I'll never give up trying to do it." So we also must never give up this quest, even though the culture I come from and the culture that you come from, we are talking people. We like to talk a lot. And you have to respect your culture, and you have to live in your culture. But at the same time, we have to wake up to paying attention to what we say, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. So Imam al-Ghazali, in talking about, speaking about things that are not our concerns and avoiding superfluous talk, here he begins to talk about what he calls afatul lisan, or the plagues of the tongue, the disasters of the tongue. And these two, which we'll talk about tonight, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, are the ones he begins with, because in his view, they are the least serious of them all. So we have to keep that in mind, that when we talk about these two topics, generally speaking, these are not haram, and in many cases they're not even makruh. It's mubah, usually. However, it can always lead to something else. And furthermore, because it is neutral territory, and because it's the most common type of speech that we have, then this is a good place to begin self-training. This is a good place for us, day to day, to begin to pay attention to the way we speak and to try to bring it under the control of our mind. One of the people who attends here told me today that he has begun to try to do this, to put his tongue behind his heart and to think about what he says. And he said immediately the effect was that everything he said to people sounded very intelligent. So this is one of the fruits that you can pick from that tree. So we should think before we speak and pay attention to each word and make sure that the word that you are going to say actually needs to be said. Is it necessary to add this additional word? Or could I delete it? Of course, one of the great secrets of writing, as many of you know, I know that many of you write, and one of the secrets of writing is the delete button. You write a whole lot of material, and if you want it to be really good, delete, delete, delete. And then you'll find it's so much better. It's so much more economical. And you put all these words in there before, but if you will take out the excessive words, then the words that remain, they speak very, very powerfully. So Imam al-Ghazali says we need to do that, just like if we're trying to develop the habit of not overeating or over-drinking. Again, in our cultures today, that's very difficult. We want our guests to eat, eat, eat. And if you don't eat, you don't love me. And if you don't eat, you don't like me, right? But when we do control our diet, which is a very important thing to do, maybe not when we're guests, but certainly when we're by ourselves, we want to eat healthily, and we don't want to eat excessively. Then, as Imam al-Ghazali says, it's very good to pay attention to every bite. And one of the most important things to teach children as they grow up is how to eat. Not to eat too fast, to eat with the right hand, not to throw food, not to reach across the table, to share food. That's extremely good for children. But also for us, when we eat, it's very important to eat bite by bite. It's also good for your health. It's also delicious. The French are among those Europeans which are the least obese. And the French have some of the best food. At least the French would be happy if I said that. But one of the things you see about many French is that they're very careful about the way they eat. They enjoy what they eat. And for that reason also, they tend not to be as obese as other people who eat and eat and eat and probably don't enjoy it as much as the French. But Imam al-Ghazali says when you eat, and this is also a principle of good health, after you swallow the bite, then you can say to yourself, I know this sounds impossible, and for me it's probably impossible, but you say do I really need another bite? Or am I full? And so whether we do that when we eat or not, it's very important to do that when we speak. That now that I've said these words, is it necessary to say anything more? Or are the words that I've said sufficient? Remember the king who said that when I speak a word, it owns me. Now I've given away the secret. Now I've shown my anger. Now I've offended the prince, or whatever. So be careful what you say. And he said, when I don't speak the word, then I own it. So the same thing when we speak. The less we speak, and the more that we think, can I stop now? And try to stop earlier rather than later, then this also tends to make our speech very economical and also consequential. And you will see also eloquent. And then also a lot of speech makes us forget what was said before. And when we tend to speak carefully and tersely, then people also can listen to what we say and they can learn it, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Again, to repeat what we said in the first lesson, one of the beautiful statements of Umar ibn Abd-Aziz, Allah be pleased with him, is his advice that if you will regard your speech to be aware of what we're saying, and we just talk and talk and talk, it's a type of entertainment, it's a way we pass time, but it's good to try to wake up and be conscious of that. The Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, min husni islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni. This is a hadith all of you know, and it's a famous hadith. Many scholars say that a quarter of Islam is based on this hadith. Part of the beautiful Islam of a person is that he or she leave aside what does not concern them. So when it comes to speech, speaking about what does not concern us means to speak about anything which, if we had remained silent about it, would not have caused harm. It would not have brought hurt. It would not have been wrongful. Okay? So this is the way we measure that. That anything that we say, which if we had not said it, we would not have harmed anyone. We would not have done wrong. We would have not brought loss. Then these are words that we don't have to say. He explains, Imam al-Ghazali, we must not speak or ask others to speak about things that may be harmful, that may be hurtful, or that may reveal things that ought to be hidden, or things which people prefer to be hidden. This is part of good adab. Or that maybe lead people when they answer the question to show off, or maybe to exaggerate, or to distort, or to lie. Okay, so this is very important. It's not just what you say, but it's also what you ask. Often we ask people many things that are very personal. And as a rule, this is not a good idea. Even Imam al-Ghazali says that it's probably better that you don't ask a person, are you fasting? Right? Well, what's wrong with that? To say, are you fasting? He says, first of all, what if the person is fasting, but he hasn't told anyone? As long as he's fasting and he or she hasn't told anyone, then his fast is written in Diwan al-Sir. It is written in the registry of secrets. because you fasted today and only you knew. And that makes your fast much more rewarding. But now when you asked him or her if he's fasting, if he answers and says yes, then he has been moved from Diwan as-Sir, the registry of secrets, to the registry of public knowledge. And of course the fast is still valid, the fast is still beautiful, but the reward is not as great. So therefore, Imam al-Ghazali uses that in that example. It's a very good example. There's nothing wrong with that. And yet, if you are seeking spiritual perfection and ethical and moral perfection, then you wouldn't do that either. And what if you ask him if he's fasting, and he is, and he says no, because he doesn't want you to know. But now he's lied, and that's not good. And what if you ask him if he's fasting, and he says yes, but now he feels so elated because you know that he was fasting today. So this is also very harmful. And so it's being thoughtful. And many people are oblivious to these things. They may ask you about your age. They may ask you about your work. They may ask you, even in some countries, believe it or not, how much money do you make? There is a particular Muslim country, I'm not going to mention it, it's not this one, that is so common, especially if you're a foreigner, and especially if you come, like me, from a country where money grows on trees. So they want to know, how much money do you make? Okay, and they ask other questions like that. And sometimes these questions are very embarrassing. Sometimes we ask people, where did you go to school? Well, that's a good question, but what if he didn't go to school? And sometimes we ask people about their lineage. In the Arab world, they might ask them, are you from Ahlul Bayt? Are you from Quraysh? What if they're not? Okay, and I know cases, in fact, where people would ask other people, are you from Ahlul Bayt? And if he says no, it's like, oh, then you're not worth anything. That's very, very bad. And one of the problems that we have in the West, and I hope that you will never have that problem, is that we have a big problem with illegitimacy. And especially among the poor. This is very, very bad. And in some cities, like Detroit, for example, which are basically a city that's ruined and down and out, and much of the city is boarded up. It's very sad. But the rate of illegitimacy among the poor there is so high, it's unbelievable. Some people say 60%. So let's say that you have a new Muslim, and then you ask him, who's your father? What's your descent? Okay, so what's he going to say? I don't know my father. I don't know my descent. That's not right. وَالْإِسْلَامُ يَجُبُّ مَا قَبْلَهُ. One of the blessings of Islam is that Islam removes everything that was before it. So when this brother or sister came into Islam, al-Islamu abuk. Islam is your father. Okay, this is a beautiful thing, but we have to be very sensitive. I know a brother, and if I mentioned his name, many of you know him too. He's a really beautiful Muslim in the United States. I love him very much. But he worked for a long time as a chaplain at some of the American universities. And he said that once he was in my city, Chicago, and he was mixing with young Muslims, and most of them are lawyers, or they are in IT, or they are engineers, and some of them live in gated communities. And he said people would come up to him and say, "What's your job?" He said, "I'm a chaplain." He said as soon as he would say that, most of them is just like, "Well, I'm not interested in talking to you anymore. So you're not a corporate lawyer? You're not making a salary of 6 figures? But this man is a very good man." And in fact, this didn't bother him because he's a strong person. But he just said that, look at this. See, so there's certain things we have to be very sensitive to. And, be intelligent. I know another person, I'm not going to mention his name because all of you know who he is. It's not me. But this person, mashallah, probably you all love him, but he was in a particular Arab country, and his host name, I'm not going to say his name, but he felt like this is so out of place, in this country. And so he was going with his host to the host's house, and he said, "Who would ever live in a house like this?" And then his host pulled into the driveway. So he said, "Foot and mouth disease." That's what he told me. He said, "I put my foot in my mouth." He said, "What can I do now?" So Allah bless him. He's a beautiful brother, and he's a great scholar. But, we need to be careful about what we say. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And again, there is, no black and white here. That do this, don't do that. You have to be your own judge. And all of us make mistakes. I know myself that sometimes I've asked people questions which I have regretted so much that I ever asked them because the answer was embarrassing. And it's like, why didn't you think? So inshallah, may Allah enable us to do that. We have to be judges of what we're doing. We have to judge our situations, judge the people that we're around, and then try to say the things that are the wisest. Again, this is very good for us in terms of the rewards and punishments that Allah gives us. But also, this is good character, and it's an essential part of the spiritual path. And also, as Imam al-Ghazali never wants us to forget, this is what leads to the enlightenment of the heart. When we begin to pay attention to things like that. Again, where do we put our tongues? Behind the heart. And when we put the tongue behind the heart, then the heart flourishes. Imam al-Ghazali says, the believer's samt, the believer's silence, keeping silence. Able to say after that is extremely effective. And he said, our gaze, when we look at things, should be ibrah. It should be admonition. That we gain wisdom from looking at things. We consider them. We turn the things we see into lessons from which we learn. And as he said, in the sense that it reminds us and it reminds others of the truth and of God and of the Prophet and of what is good. So our speech should be admonition. This is what we should strive for. And again, this is something that is characteristic of some people, sometimes elderly people. I know, for example, I can think of elderly women who it's like everything they say is a word of admonition. When I was a boy, I went to Germany for a while to study. My father sent me to Germany to study for a while. And this was in the Black Forest, which was really beautiful. And we would take walks every morning, probably twice a day. And I remember that there was a little German lady. She was so cute, so beautiful, very short. And whenever she would see me, I was her son. I had to come. And amazingly, this woman, the only thing she ever talked to me about was God. And she would also admonish me, don't do this, don't do that. Even, not her, but another woman. Once I was walking by a field, and this peasant woman, Swabian peasant woman, she walked up to me and she said in Swabish, Du musst zufrieden sein mit dem, das auf dich kommt. You know, which it means in Swabian, you must be content with whatever comes on the table. And it's like all my life, I thought, what was this? I mean, this is a principle by which to live, right? You must be satisfied with what comes on the table, just like you have to be satisfied with what Allah tests you with in life, to tell you something that is beneficial and wise. And many traditional societies are like that. Every breath and every minute you have, Imam al-Ghazali says, is your capital. It is Ra'su Malik. It is your capital. And so therefore, you need to utilize it and direct it towards that which will benefit you and that will concern you. Just like when you have capital, you want to invest it in an intelligent way. So also he says, think of every breath you breathe, every word you say as your investment capital. And you want to save it, and you want to make it grow, and you want to benefit from it. Your life is measured, as you know. You have an ajal. You have an appointed time. And your ajal is not in minutes, or seconds, or days. But your ajal is in what? Breaths. It's in breaths. That's why think about every breath, because your life is measured in breath. And the breath is when you breathe in and you breathe out. It's also a good thing in health. One of the principles of good health is pay attention to the way you breathe. Breathe in deeply. Enjoy the oxygen and breathe out. And that is one moment of your life. في كل نفس تبدي له فيك قدر يمضي. As Ibn Ata'Allah says, in every breath that you breathe, God has a destiny in you that He fulfills. So this is all part of what? Waking up. Waking up. Think about every breath you take. People who are depressed, and you know people like that, maybe sometimes you're depressed. That's a natural thing to happen. Happens to all of us. But the person who's depressed, look at them. Look at yourself if you're depressed. They don't breathe. They breathe extremely shallowly. Just enough. It would. Sometimes it's all they need to know, to turn it around. But pay attention to your breaths. And then pay attention to the words that you speak with your breaths. And try to speak about what concerns you, what concerns others. Again, as we saw in the lesson yesterday, that one of the benefits of not speaking much is that you can understand your friend. You can understand your companion. Because now you can listen. Okay, so then when we listen, and this is good character, when we speak, we try to speak something that concerns them. And that takes a special gift. And I know here in Egypt, this is something I know. I came here in 1973. This is where I learned Arabic, by the way, in the American University of Cairo. And that was a beautiful year for me and my wife. And our first daughter, Iman, was born here. That was a big thing. Big thing. But it happened, that a friend of mine, I think that he lost his wallet. And he didn't have any money. And he was maybe around Azhar or something like that. And he had to get home, and it was a far way to go. And he said that he didn't know what to do because he didn't have any money. He'd lost his wallet. And then he said this elderly woman, like a grandmother, She just came out of nowhere. Probably a very typical Egyptian grandmother. And she said, you need something, don't you? Like, you need some money. And he said she gave him the money he needed to get the public transportation to go home. And I believe that's a true story. For a mark of good character, then they also have an idea which may be very valid of what you actually need. And then they can speak to that, or they can help you to get that. So we want the words we speak, the breaths we take, we want them to be a huge reward for us in the hereafter, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and we don't want to squander anything. And this is the path of the hereafter. Imam al-Ghazali, as all of you know who've read his wonderful book, Ihya deen, which is one of the most amazing books, in my belief, ever written. But one of the things that he's concerned with in that book is the ulama. And he's especially concerned with the ulama who break their trust, who are not the ulama that they should be. And that's why he emphasizes that to be an alim or an alima, and Islam is filled with great women scholars. Some of our greatest scholars are women. The greatest muhaddiths are women. But he says that, to be an alim, really, you need one thing first, and then everything else after that fits in place. And that is to know that the world to come is true. The garden is true, the fire is true. They're cosmic truths. And that the next world is infinitely more valuable than this. That's what we believe. We all say that on our tongues, but it should also be the way that we live in an intelligent and a balanced and a wise way. And therefore also to guard the tongue. This is the path of the hereafter. And this makes you a scholar of the hereafter. And the scholar of the hereafter is the best one. Maybe you only know 10 hadith and not 10,000. But if you will practice them and live by them, and if you truly believe in them, and you believe that the hereafter is more valuable, then you are the kind of scholar that we need. Imam al-Ghazali says, keep the hereafter constantly before your eyes. بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى, as Allah says. But on the contrary, you prefer the life of this world. We're all like that. This world is here with us. It's real. It's concrete. We always are busy with it, and we have to be. But don't forget the next world. وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. And the scholar of the hereafter is the one that knows وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. No one has knowledge. No one can be said to be a scholar or a faqih until he or she believes in this and knows it to be true and lets it be what directs them in their life. May Allah make us like that. And then Imam al-Ghazali says, don't be like the people of Moses in the desert when Allah was sending to them as a miracle every day, al-mannu was-salwa. He was sending to them what we call in English manna and quails. Okay, and this was a daily miracle that occurred before their eyes. And yet they preferred other things. وَإِذْ قُلْتُمْ يَا مُوسَى لَن نَصْبِرَ عَلَى طَعَامٍ وَاحِدٍ. This is the same food every day? Yes, but that food is manna and quails. Miraculous food. Food from Allah. أَن نَصْبِرُ عَلَى طَعَامٍ وَاحِدٍ فَادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ يُخْرِجْ لَنَا مِمَّا تُنْبِتُ الْأَرْضُ من بقلها وقثائها وفومها وعدسها وبصلها. قال أتستبدلون الذي هو أدنى بِالَّذِي هُوَ خَيْرٌ. He says, would you prefer that which is lower over that which is higher? He said, Moses, we cannot bear only one kind of food. Call upon your Lord for us to bring forth for us from what the earth grows, its green herbs. That's noble. Imam al-Ghazali says, when we waste our words, when we throw our words away, especially in unneeded, superfluous talk, or talk that doesn't concern us, then he said, we are people who prefer the green herbs, the cucumbers, the garlic, the lentils, and the onions over the manna and quail of excellent speech. So he says, don't be like that. And he also says that what would you think about a person if you offered them a mansion with a swimming pool and 2 big cars and a garden and a beautiful yard that's manicured? So you could have that mansion, or you could have a brick or a piece of clay. So you would take the brick or the piece of clay? Or would you rather take the mansion? Of course, none of us would turn down the mansion, right? But he said, that's exactly what we're doing when we speak the speech of green herbs and onions and lentils and garlic, right? Because if you would use those words for admonition, you know, like the little old lady, she was so cute. She had her cane always. And she'd always tell me about Gott im Himmel, God in heaven. It's amazing. And I know many of the Germans I was around in those days, it was a long time ago, but they were people who believed in God. And they would talk to me about God. So, you know, mashallah, it's like, that's precious. That's precious. Talk about God, talk about wisdom, talk about good, give people good advice. If they're depressed, bring them out of their depression. Then you're getting palaces, you're getting mansions in paradise. Imam al-Ghazali's Ihya, I can't say too much about it. This book is a treasure. And if you read it carefully, the more you read it, the more you will get. Also, Imam al-Ghazali, he is a faqih. He is a master of usul al-fiqh. And therefore, his book is also completely within the Sharia. Some people say the Ihya is a Sufi book. No, it's not at all. The Ihya is a book about the heart. And Imam al-Ghazali speaks in the Ihya in a way that everyone can understand. Whether they like the Sufis or they don't like the Sufis. Whether they want the spiritual path or they don't. Imam al-Ghazali, and he is himself a great master. But he will never, in Ihya, he never would take you there. Other books he would do that. But in Ihya, he will always stop short. He'll bring you to the door and say, here is the door. If you want to go through, you can. But you don't have to do that. But this is what you need so that your heart becomes sound. Imam al-Ghazali, one of the great things about him in the Ihya is what he doesn't say. Don't ever think that Imam al-Ghazali put all his knowledge in the Ihya. He did not at all. He always puts just enough for you. Just enough for everyone. Lower classes, middle classes, upper classes, educated, uneducated, women, men. It's an amazing book. But one of the things you see is he gives you glimpses into the culture of his time. And one of the things about the culture of his time is that, especially the Muslim culture of his time, of course, is that Muslims love to travel. And we could travel. We didn't have passports, we didn't have customs. We had merchants that traveled to China and went to Spain and Portugal in the 1800s. And he was dying. It was so hot. It was so difficult to travel. And he was sweating. And, he had to, do everything he could just to survive. And then all of a sudden he was passed by a caravan. And the caravan was like maybe 40 or 50 camels. And they were merchants. They weren't Bedouins. They were merchants who were probably on their way from maybe East Africa or West Africa to northern Algeria or some other place. And the Frenchman just stopped. And he thought, like, look at the ease with which they do this. Like, I'm about to die. I can't survive in this desert. And they just go through it with the greatest of ease. That's the way we were, by land and by sea. We were masters of the seas as well. So Muslims love to travel, but because they traveled in those days, today you get your ticket, get on the airplane, and 7 or 8 hours, you're in the place you want to go to. Or maybe you have to go 15 or 13. But it's amazing how fast we travel, as you know. But in those days, of course, travel is basically very slow. Even though if you have a caravan, you would be surprised how far you can go, how easily you can go. So therefore, in the Muslim world, people love to tell about their travels. And of course, you know the great book of Ibn Battuta, which is an amazing book. The thing is that most Muslims were little Ibn Battutas. And when they came back from their travels, they used to tell about their travels. So here Imam al-Ghazali, he doesn't say don't do that, but he said be careful, because it may be in talking about your travels that you talk about things that don't concern you. So he says, you sit with people and tell them all the details of your travels. Maybe they're details that didn't really happen. Maybe you make up things. Maybe you exaggerate things. You talk about all the food you ate and the different kinds of food you ate, the clothes you wore, the clothes that the other people wore, the people you met, the mountains, the valleys that you saw, of where it would be better to tell this in a beautiful way, but don't go to all this detail, especially because often that detail may lead to things that are not true. And of course, this is often what we do. We take a trip. Maybe in the trip we weren't very happy. Maybe in the trip things were actually very difficult. But when we go home, we don't tell that side of the story. We just, oh yes, I had a wonderful trip, and we did this and we did that. Well, is what you're saying true? Is it not true? Because that is also a standard. We want to be honest. And he said maybe also you backbite. Maybe you say things about people that are not good to say. Maybe also that you speak about the trip in a way that makes you look special. That, like, I am, after all, an experienced traveler. And I do, after all, know how to handle difficult situations. And then he said also, maybe you speak ill of something that God created. And there's really no reason to do that. Some of the lands we go to are beautiful. Some of the lands we go to are not beautiful. But we should be polite when we speak about them. And, we should also remember that what we see is something God created. So, as the Sufis say, if you look for good, you will find it to no end of good. If you look for evil, you will find it to no end of evil. So this is an example that he gives, and so you might say, oh, what an ugly land that was, what a boring landscape that was. So he says, you don't have to say that. There's no need to say that. You could maybe give, if the person thinks he'll go there to find mountains and beautiful things, you might tell them that, well, I don't think you'll find that there. But there's no need to degrade the things that you saw. just as there's no need to exaggerate about the good things that you saw. Again, Imam al-Ghazali says, beware of the questions you ask. Now, this is something that I talked about just a few minutes ago. So, we've already talked about this, but he said, most of our questions contain potential harms. They're not well thought out. And he said, often, we ask questions to fish for information, and that's not good. There's a famous story from early Islam, and it's told by Al-Junayd as-Salik, may Allah be pleased with him. And he says that 3 young men went to a great scholarly saint, and they asked 3 questions. And the first young man asked his question, and so the saint looked at him, the scholar, and he said, I will answer your question, but I believe that you will be tried. You will be a great scholar. And then the third asked his question, and he said, I will answer your question, I believe you will be a great saint. So then the 3 got together, and they had with them Al-Junayd. And Al-Junayd, as you know, he is an amazing imam, and he has incredible insight into things, always. Al-Muhasibi, may Allah be pleased with him, who was one of his sheikhs. He said, the way that I trained Al-Junayd was by asking him questions. So he'd say, what is shukr? What is thankfulness? And Al-Junayd would say, it's that you use all the gifts that God gave you to thank him, and not to obey him, not to disobey him. So this is the way Al-Junayd was. This is why we call him Imam al-Ta'ifa. He is the Imam of all the Sufis. So they said, what did you ask when you asked this first question? He said, I wanted to test the scholar. Okay, well that's fishing for information. It's a type of fishing. And many of us do that today. Isn't that true? And again, you can go to some countries. I don't think I've seen that in Egypt very much. But there are certain countries, and I won't mention names, where most questions are fishing. How much do you really know? How much of the Quran have you actually memorized? Do you really know what you're talking about? And also, whose side are you on? My side or their side? Okay, so those are dangerous questions. And as this scholar said, I believe you will be tested. Because this man, his intention was to test the scholar. So the scholar passed the test. I don't know if the other person did. And then the second one, he said, you would be a great scholar. So they asked him, what was your intention? He said, I wanted to get knowledge. Okay, that's a good reason to ask a question. So he said, and you will get knowledge. You'll be a scholar. And then the third one, he said, I think you will be a great saint. So who was that? Al-Junayd as-Salik. And he said, my intention was I just wanted to get close to him. I just wanted to be able to see him up close, maybe even to touch him. And so he said, you'll be a saint. So again, we should be careful about the questions we ask. And many of us come from cultures where questions are asked to spy on people and to ferret out information. So he says also that, we ask questions like, what did so-and-so say? Okay, well maybe that doesn't concern you. Maybe it does concern you. Or what did they do? And so Imam al-Ghazali says, this is like spying. And you don't want to use your questions to fish out information. And then I mentioned this before, but he gives here the example of asking the question, are you fasting today? Do you get up at night to pray? So these questions, he says, remove the person from the registry of secrets, diwan al-sir, to the registry of public knowledge, diwan al-jahar. And it also lowers the worship that they do. Okay, but the person has to answer you because you ask them the question. So what are they going to say? What if they lie? What if they don't answer at all? Imam al-Ghazali says. They don't answer and then you're hurt. Because you know he doesn't like you. And you know that he's proud. And he looks down on you. So, and maybe also this brings about riya, ostentation. Don't ask people about acts of disobedience. Okay, now would you ever do that? Probably not. You probably would never do that. But in fact, some people do that. And astaghfirullah, I knew a person many years ago, and this astaghfirullah, he asked the person, I couldn't believe it, about the escapades he used to do as a non-Muslim. It's like, are you okay? I mean, of course it makes you question, like, is that scholar all right? Because, like, why would you ask such a question? But it was extremely embarrassing. And especially for the new Muslim, it was very embarrassing because I became a Muslim to put an end to all of that. So why are you asking me about that? So he said, don't ask people about acts of disobedience. And don't tell them to others. And this is again something that a lot of us do. Again, I come from the middle part of the United States, what they call Middle America. And Middle Americans have a distinct culture. And part of our culture is that we're extremely open. We're extremely frank. And therefore you often see that people that come from Middle America, they are people, whether they're Muslims or not, who will tell you everything about their life. And it's like, I didn't want to hear most of this. Right? So this is also something that you probably don't have to be told. I'm sure you don't have to be told this. But again, many people do have to be told that. And often, a husband and wife, you know, it's like, you don't have to tell your husband everything you did in the past. Inshallah, you're a good person, but some of us make mistakes. You don't have to tell your husband about that. And he doesn't have to tell you about what he did either, because you want Allah to end that, be done with it. And, you know, we live in a time also, Allah bless you and protect you, especially in you know, some of our Western countries, where abuse is very common. You know, that's a very horrible thing. And an extremely horrible thing. But, you know, the person who's been abused, you know, has no imperative whatsoever to tell anybody about that, unless it is going to be in order to find a cure, to find someone who can deal with that trauma and help them to overcome that trauma. So this is also very important. You don't have to tell your whole life story. And there are always things that it's better just to be quiet about. And some of the things that you don't want to tell people about are things that are precious. You know, there may be really good things in your life that, you know, you are thankful for. And you will tell certain people, but you might not necessarily tell everyone. Even dreams, for example. Beautiful dreams, and even bad dreams. It's not, generally speaking, wise to tell the world about that. Because certain people can use the information that is revealed in the stories we tell, or even the dreams we tell about, to harm us. And that may seem very hard to believe, but it's true. So this is why also we learn to keep secrets. We learn to talk about things that are wise. And even people that have been through horrible experiences. And, you know, I know cases like that. I know the example, you know, of culture. And part of our culture is that we're extremely open. We're extremely frank. And therefore, you often see that people that come from middle America, they are people, whether they're Muslims or not, who will tell you everything about their life. And it's like, I didn't want to hear most of this. Right? So this is also something that you probably don't have to be told. I'm sure you don't have to be told this. But again, many people do have to be told that. And often, a husband and wife, it's like, you don't have to tell your husband everything you did in the past. Inshallah, you're a good person, but some of us make mistakes. You don't have to tell your husband about that. And he doesn't have to tell you about what he did either, because you want Allah to end that, be done with it. And we live in a time also, Allah bless you and protect you, especially in some of our Western countries, where abuse is very common. That's a very horrible thing, and an extremely horrible thing. But the person who's been abused, has no imperative whatsoever to tell anybody about that, unless it is going to be in order to find a cure, to find someone who can deal with that trauma and help them to overcome that trauma. So this is also very important. You don't have to tell your whole life story. And there are always things that it's better just to be quiet about. And some of the things that you don't want to tell people about are things that are precious. There may be really good things in your life that, you are thankful for. And you will tell certain people, but you might not necessarily tell everyone. Even dreams, for example. Beautiful dreams, and even bad dreams. It's not, generally speaking, wise to tell the world about that. Because certain people can use the information that is revealed in the stories we tell, or even the dreams we tell about, to harm us. And that may seem very hard to believe, but it's true. So this is why also we learn to keep secrets. We learn to talk about things that are wise. And even people that have been through horrible experiences. And ultimately you'll find the truth. She told me that. And she became a nun. She became a Buddhist. She went through good experiences and bad. And then at the end she became a Muslim. And when I met her, which was in Florida, she was really a wonderful woman. But again, it's like you don't have to tell the world about this. Okay, but God had wisdom in that. She was really, really hurt as a child. And so now, having become a Muslim and a mature woman, what do you think she can do? She can help people. And she has amazing insight into pain. And she can know that this child needs help. And, this adult has been through hell. This is because of what she went through. So in the end, because Allah guided her to Islam, and she was able to deal with this, she became, in my belief, a saintly woman. One of the amazing things in creation that I love to mention over and over again is the reality of coal. Coal, faham. Black coal. It will make you dirty. You can't carry it and not be dirty. It's only good, really, for a few things like burning. It's good to put in your furnace if you have a coal-burning furnace. But if you take that black coal and you put it deep in the earth or somewhere else under immense pressure and great heat for a long amount of time, usually, although we can make these minerals, it turns into what? Diamond. Isn't that amazing? That's a sign that coal can turn into diamonds. And in the case of this woman, that's what I say, she's a diamond. She's a diamond. But before that, her life was nothing but a life of coal. And you would think that nothing could come out of it. Nobody loved her. Nobody cared about her. I mean, even if she had a pet, she had a little cat, and one of the ugly people in her family, the stepfather, he hung her cat and killed it. That's nothing. That's nothing. And then she came out of all of that. Also true of oppressed peoples, you know, and we have many oppressed peoples in the world. But one of the things about oppressed people is that if they can grow again, and if they can find this religion, then they can also become like diamonds, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. So, don't ask questions that embarrass people. Don't ask questions that make people uncomfortable. Don't ask people things that pertain to what is private. Never ask questions that show disrespect. And of course, this can be something we do if we don't like people. So we begin to ask questions that will embarrass them, and we want to do that. So Imam al-Ghazali gives some examples of not speaking or asking things that don't concern us, or speaking too much. And one of the beautiful examples he gives is a story about Luqman al-Hakim and the Prophet David, alayhi salam. As you know, Dawood, the Iron Age begins at his time. That's definitely sure. Iron in the Quran, what does it say? وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدِ, right? You know, God says, right? He says, we sent down iron in Surah Al-Hadid. And it's very interesting because the commentators often give you very interesting commentaries on that. What does it mean that Allah sent down iron? Well, the thing is that this verse is amazing because iron before David was known. What did they call it? The heavenly metal. And that's what they called it in many languages. In many languages of the world. The heavenly metal. Why? Because they only got iron one way. Which way was that? Who knows?
Meteor.
Sorry?
A meteor?
Meteors. Meteors. You see, because to have that iron ore melted and smelted so that it becomes iron, this would only be in meteors that fly through space and burn and come to earth. The giant Jalut, Goliath, he had an iron spearhead on his spear. And of course, this is before David will make iron. And where did he get that? A meteor. How many have read the Iliad? It's an amazing work. The Iliad. And Achilles, when he finally stops his depression and he finally decides that I'll help you guys, you know, then he has his races and he has his games. And one of the main prizes, if you read in the Iliad, this is long before David, one of the main prizes that Achilles will give is a meteor of iron. It's worth more than gold because you can make it into iron weapons. So David, peace be upon him, he teaches us how to smelt iron so that we can make it, you know, here in this world. In any case, David also made armor. He made armor, and he made you know, other things associated with that. So they say that Luqman went to David, alayhi salam, and he found him making armor. Luqman didn't know what it was. Probably nobody knew what it was. Like, what are you doing? What are you making? And Luqman wanted to ask, but his wisdom made him hold his tongue. Finally, Dawood finished, and he took up the armor, and he admired it. Look at this armor. And he said, what an excellent piece of armor for battle. And Luqman said, silence is wisdom. As-sukutu hikmah. This is an Arabic method, you all know it. As-sukutu hikmah. He said, silence is wisdom, but few are capable of it. He said, I got my answer without even asking. I got my answer without even asking. And you can do that. Try that sometimes. I know right now we've, mashallah, been to, Al-Azhar many times since we came here. I love to go there. I have a particular question that I want to have the answer to, but I don't want to ask that question. I want somehow somebody's going to tell me the answer without my asking. I'll be here for 2 weeks, so we'll see if that question is that. But that's what to follow that. Just want to say, I know if I ask that question, they will tell me. But no, it's like there's something about the houses there that I want to know. So I say, Tariq will tell me, or someone else will tell me, but I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to ask. So that's probably not wise, is it? That's probably very unwise. I'll probably have to ask my question. But many times, you'll find out what you need if you'll just listen and just pay attention. And Luqman al-Hakim, he took great joy in that. He took great joy in that. Silence is wisdom, but few people are capable of it. I got my answer without even asking. Superfluous speech. We call that in Arabic al-fudul min al-kalam. So in speech we need temperance, iffa, to be able to hold back. And we need temper. We need to be able to temper our speech. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given jawami al-kalim. He was given these words that bring everything together. This is amazing. And again, the Prophet spoke. When he spoke, he wasn't just speaking to Abu Bakr. He wasn't, radiallahu anhu. He wasn't just speaking to Aisha, radiallahu anhu, was he? He was speaking to you. He was speaking to you and me in the 21st century. And therefore, the words he says must be extremely wise, extremely carefully chosen, because they have to be good for his companions, his successors, and then for the 8th century, the 9th century, the 10th century, the 20th century, the 21st century, and how many ever centuries come. And of course, today, you and me, and so much of what we do, like what we're doing right now, we're speaking to the whole world, right? It's so easy to forget that, because here we are in Cairo in a beautiful setting, wonderful people, mashallah, tabarakallah, but this is being recorded, and it's being watched in Malaysia. I know that. It's being watched in Chicago. I know that too. They sent me a picture. And it's being watched, in Canada, and it's being watched in other places. And not only that, recorded, so that potentially anybody can see it, anybody can hear it. And for that reason, we ask Allah to let us speak words that are not just good for you, but hopefully are also good for that huge unknown audience that is there. The beautiful people we know now that are hearing it, but also people that are going to hear it at other times and other places. But this is the way the Prophet spoke, because everything he said was for all people and all times. And that's why no unneeded words, no superfluous speech. His speech was, as we say, ma qalla wa dal. It's what is very little and indicates infinite meanings. Ma qalla wa dal. What a beautiful expression. Words filled with meaning. Words that are veils, or that are receptacles, that are filled with meaning. And as we said before, words that emerge from thoughtful silence. Silence is power. Silence is gatheredness. Silence is gold. Silence pollinates the intellect. And then when you speak, you give us delicious fruit to eat. Words that have lasting meaning. Superfluous, excessive speech that are not good judgment. Lack of self-control. It's very hard, isn't it? You know yourself. When you get started talking, it is so hard to stop. Especially if you are saying things that are making people happy and making people laugh, and then you've got so much to say, and are you exaggerating now? I know I do that, because therefore, speaking superfluous speech, excessive speech, al-fudul min al-kalam, it's a type of carelessness. It's a type of negligence. Ghafla. It's a type of heedlessness. And we don't want to do that. You talk as much as you want, but make your words flowers. Make your words a beautiful bouquet. Make your words gold and silver. It's your capital. And you could be generous and give some to me, and you won't lose any. You give me precious words. As-sukutu hikmah. In fact, I heard that today. I know it's an old method, but we were with some wonderful people today, and one of them said, As-sukutu hikmah. Okay, so thank you very much, because that's worth more than $1 million to me. And you still have your Ra's al-Mal. On the other hand, when we are careful in the way we speak, that reflects good judgment, intelligence, and people will know you for that. And when you're silent, people think you're very intelligent. They don't think you're dumb. They think you're very intelligent. There was one man who came to sit with Imam Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa was brilliant beyond words. Abu Hanifa is really amazing. I love Abu Hanifa. And this man was elderly and stately and dignified, and he wouldn't talk. And Imam Abu Hanifa put his legs under himself, and he sat, with his legs crossed. And then after a while, the man said something, and it wasn't very intelligent. And so Imam Abu Hanifa said, now I can extend my legs. He said, now I can stretch my legs. Okay. So, also, we must not be mechanical when we speak. So we have to be أتقياء أمتي أبرياء من التكلف. The righteous of my ummah are free of the defect of artificiality. So we don't want to have takalluf, and also we don't want to be mechanical. We're not robots that are speaking. We want to use our words graciously and generously, but still measure them, weigh them, and make sure that our words are hospitable, that our words are amiable, and that our words are also for the right time and the right place. Love is a very important part of Islam. Al-mahabba. لَيْسَ هُنَاكَ مَحَبَّةً مَعَ اللَّهِ. There is no love with God. We just love God, that's alone. But there's mahabba fillah. There's mahabba lillah. And mahabba, when words to be words that are amiable. And if you can't do that, and sometimes you can't, because sometimes the people maybe are not nice. And maybe you shouldn't speak like that to them, because you might be encouraging them to do bad behavior. But nevertheless, if you can't speak good, فَلْيَسْكُتْ, then be quiet. So let your words be beautiful words, amiable words. And if you can't speak that way, it's good not to say anything at all. And again, here there is no black and white. This is one of the problems with Muslims today, that they want everything black and white. This is one of the reasons why extremist ideologies influence many Muslims today. Because extremist ideologies are always black and white. We are right, they are wrong. We are believers, they are not believers. And one of the great things about Islamic civilization is that there is black and white. There are qat'iyat, usul ad-deen, that we all agree on, but most everything is many colors. They're what we call dhanniyat, and they require ijtihad, and there will be differences of opinion. So most things are like that. They're not black and white. They're not clear-cut. You have to think. You have to exercise judgment. And at the end of the day, one of the most beautiful things you can do when you have a moment to yourself, maybe before you're going to sleep, is just think about what you did that day. Think about the things you said. Think about the choices you made. Were they really wise? Were they really proper? And you may regret what you said. Then do tawbah. Ask Allah to forgive you. But this is how you become a wise person. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. This is our daily ijtihad and jihad. It is our daily ijtihad, exercise of good judgment. And it is our daily jihad. Jihad always has three elements. Did you know that? Jihad is the moral pinnacle of Islam. Jihad always has three elements. There's something really good we want. Let's say, for example, a couple want to have a child. You want to have a baby. Okay? So that's good. Okay? Then there's an obstacle before that good, which is that the mother has got to conceive the child. She has to carry the child. You know how difficult that is. Extremely difficult. And for some women, it's almost more than they can do. The hormones change. She can't sleep. She can't rest. In some countries, women are also very careful only to sleep in certain positions because traditions tell them the baby may get in the wrong position. And you don't want that to happen. You want your baby to be in the right position. You don't want the baby to come out feet first. Right? So this is difficult. And you know how difficult it is. And then there's the birth itself, which no man can understand. I know that from my wife. My wife said, don't you ever think that you know what it's like to have a child. And she told me other things I'm not going to say. But she said, you have no idea. And you never will. Okay? But, then she has to have birth. And then you have to nurse the child immediately. And you have to take care of the child. So this is a huge obstacle. And then you strive to do that. Always the way that jihad as an ethical principle is set up. You want to learn knowledge. Maybe you want to be a doctor, or you want to be a lawyer, or a scholar of Islam. Is that easy? No, it's not easy at all. Sleepless nights, right? Books that you read over and over again, and you have to read them once again. And examinations, and all the tuition. Okay, that's a huge obstacle. But you strive to overcome that obstacle to get that huge benefit, which is the knowledge that enables you to make a living and to help other people. Okay, so this is our ijtihad and jihad also, to speak correctly. And there are a lot of obstacles. It's so easy not to do that. It's so difficult to do it. How can I put my tongue, behind my heart when I have so much to say? Okay? Well, let's work on that. And if we will be conscious of it, maybe it becomes easier and easier bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Again, as Imam al-Ghazali said, just as when you eat, you take a bite of food, think, do I need to eat more? Or could I stop now and be healthy and be satisfied? So the same thing. When you speak words, could I stop now? Could I be silent? Have I said enough? Ata ibn Abi Rabah, may Allah be pleased with him, one of the great successors, he said, those who were before you, meaning the Prophet, he's a successor of the successors. He said, those who were before you, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, his companions, radiallahu anhu, and the successors, greatly disliked superfluous speech. They greatly disliked al-fudul min al-kalam. Now what would that mean? That would mean especially in themselves. That when they spoke, they disliked very much that they say things that it was not necessary to say. The Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is a Hasan hadith, طوبى لمن أمسك الفضل من لسانه وأنفق الفضل من ماله. It's a Hasan hadith, a good hadith. Not the strongest, but it's strong enough. طوبى لمن أمسك الفضل من لسانه وأنفق الفضل من ماله. Good tidings, طوبى, to anyone who holds back the excess of his tongue and spends the excess of his wealth, gives it in charity, gives it in good things. Imam al-Ghazali said when he wrote the Ihya, look how people have turned things upside down. The fadl or the fudul of our wealth, we keep that. And the fadl of our tongues, we spend that. We say lots of that. They say that Sulaiman, this is a story, it's a nice story. May not be true, but it's okay. It's a good story. Sulaiman alayhi salam, they say that an Ifrit came to him. Ifrit is a big jinni. Some say it's a scholarly jinn. Okay, and so he sent him out and learned. He sent him out to the marketplace for something, and then he learned. The jinni went to the marketplace, and they told him, that when the jinni was in the marketplace, he was looking up and looking down and looking up and looking down and looking up and looking down. He's looking at the people, then he's looking at the sky. And so they said, why were you doing that? You kept looking up and down. And he said, عَجِبْتُ مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ عَلَى رُؤُوسِ النَّاسِ مَا أَسْرَعَ مَا يَكْتُبُونَ وَمِنَ الَّذِينَ أَسْفَلْ مِنْهُمْ النَّاسِ مَا أَسْرَعَ مَا يُمْلِئُونَ. Okay, so he said, I was amazed, at the angels, how fast they can write. Because they're writing down the words the people were speaking. And I was amazed at the people below them, how well they dictate. Because they're just talking. And the angels are recording all of that, just like a tape recorder would do. So Imam al-Ghazali then talks more about this. How are we coming with time?
We need to wrap up.
Huh?
We need to wrap up.
Okay, so let's do that. And I think, this is the last page. Imam al-Ghazali says again that there are many reasons why people do talk about things that don't concern them, and why they talk about things that are superfluous, that are excessive. And we'll go through these quickly. He said, first of all, he says there are reasons why you shouldn't do it, and the reasons why we do it. First of all, he says, this is a waste of your breaths. And again, it's a waste of your breath. But again, Imam al-Ghazali has in mind that your breaths are the most important thing in your life. Your life is measured by breath. In every breath, there is a destiny that is fulfilled. In Arabic, we say, كل يوم, well, in the Quran, we say, كل يوم هو في شأن, about Allah. What is a yawm? In Arabic, and this would be true of Hebrew. In Hebrew and Aramaic, you have the same word, yawm. And it's not a day necessarily. The yawm is any period of time in which something miraculous happens. So the yawm is the rise of the sun and the set of the sun, because that's a miraculous thing. The sun came and the sun set. But the smallest yawm is not 12 hours or 24 hours. The smallest yawm is a breath. It's a breath. Because in every breath you take, Allah is doing something amazing. في كل نفس تبدي له فيه قدر يمضي. Allah has a destiny of yours in every breath you take. So it's a yawm. That's why when we say كل يوم هو في شأن, we mean in every moment. And then also you have a yawm like Yawm ad-Deen. The Yawm ad-Deen is how many years? It's like 50,000 for the disbeliever. But there's no sun, there's no shadow, there's no marking of time. The Arabs say there are 2 days, يوم نعمة ويوم بؤس أو كما قالوا. There are 2 days, the day of blessing and the day of hardship. Okay, so the day is any period of time in which something very important happens. Ayamullah, Ayamul Arab, وما أشبه ذلك. So he says your breaths are important, and you don't want to waste your breaths. You want to be conscious of your breath. Wallahi, if you do that, if you will be conscious of your breath, you will be healthy, and you will be happy, and you won't be depressed. It's very important. One of the greatest things is to live in the present moment. What does that mean? To live in your breaths. And don't attach to what does not exist. And again, you have so many worries, I have worries. We have concerns, I have concerns. We have responsibilities to fulfill. No question about that. I have to be back in Chicago on such and such a date. I have to teach at the University of Chicago. I've got to be concerned about that. There's certain preparations I have to make, right? I would be a fool not to do that. Okay, but again, don't be worrying about things that don't yet exist. Do what you have to do. Okay, but live in the real world. Live in the world of realities that are there before you, and may Allah make that possible, and pay attention to yourself. Most people live outside of themselves. Men do that more than women, but many women do that too. They live in their ideas, they live in their worries, they live in their anxieties, they live in their minds. But your body is what carries you, not your mind. Your breath is what makes you live, not your mind. So pay attention to your mind, pay attention to your heart, but pay attention to you also, and your breath, and even your physical self. Is there a pain? Is there a problem? Many people don't pay attention to that. Their body may be telling them that there's a problem, and they don't listen. And often they don't listen until it's too late. So he says, exchange, noble uses of speech, exchange the lowly uses of speech for noble ones. Just try to convert the speech. And instead of spending, pennies, spend gold. And you can do that a lot because your words are easy to say. But words of meaning, they are golden. Okay? And also he said one of the problems with superfluous speech, or talking about what does not concern us, as we said before, this is not haram, and often it's not makruh, it's just mubah. But he said often it goes to what is makruh, or what is haram. Why do we do this? He says we do this because we have a desire to know things. Well, that's good, but we should have a desire to know things that are beneficial. And there are many things that we like to know that are not beneficial. And so it's good to put those to the side and to focus on other things that are much more important. But we as human beings, we're interested in many things. And that's a good sign, in fact. If you don't have curiosity, there's something wrong with your mind. But still, we have to put a limit to that. That there's some things that are more important than other things. And then we do it out of mubasata. That we want people to be happy. We want people to be at ease, and that's a good thing. We want to be friendly. We want to do it out of tawaddud, out of out of affection for other people. But still, be careful not to go too far. And often we speak just to pass time. And as we said today, speech has become entertainment, the talk show. And in fact, we enjoy speaking, especially, well, not always, but often, especially if people are listening and laughing and smiling and giving us attention, then of course we get great enjoyment. The cure, Imam al-Ghazali says there are many cures, but he said from the standpoint of knowledge, never forget that you are mortal. You know, that your death is at hand. And in fact, you know, just yesterday morning, a man whom I visited, I knew very well in the Gambia, and, you know, he died. And, you know, when he said goodbye to us, it was like he was saying goodbye, but he wasn't sick. He didn't know he was sick. And he had people over at his house, and he got up to speak, and he began to falter in his speech, and he fell to the floor. May Allah have mercy on him. May Allah have mercy on him. He was a good man, okay? And he's not that old, but there he is. And so I would be a fool to forget that. And you know, you are young and healthy, right? But you would be a fool to forget that too, because none of us knows what's in store for us, do we? We have car accidents, may Allah protect us. We have sicknesses, may Allah protect us. So many things happen. None of us knows how much time we have. So he said, never forget that. You are mortal. Your life will end. Your breaths will come up short someday. So he said that, and you will be asked about every word you said. Your breaths are your capital. So be careful how you use that capital. Don't become bankrupt. And he said, your tongue should be a snare. And he means by that, a snare, he means by that, as I know that you know, or most of you know, the snare is a type of trap that you use, or a net to catch animals. Right? So you have snares to catch birds, and you have snares, you know, to catch rabbits and things like that. And you have other types of traps that hunters use. So he said, make your tongue a snare, a trap by which you hunt valuable things. You speak valuable things. You catch great rewards from God. The beautiful word. And the beautiful word is sadaqah. And how many times do we have in our families and among our friends big problems? And often really good families have huge problems because Satan wants to destroy those families. And so he puts enmity between father and mother, you know, between brother and sister. And often the families where this is the worst are the best families. The families that really count. And it can be very difficult for them. And you could give me examples. We all see this in our lives. So, you know, we want to catch great rewards, and there's no reward greater than beautiful words that set things right. The peacemaker. Blessed be the peacemaker, as the Bible says. Blessed be the makers of peace. That's what you want to be. Muslihun. You want to be people who set things right. Make your mother happy. Make your father happy. Make the brother and sister happy. Make the brothers happy. And these things hurt us so much. Maybe a relative does something to us that is for us unforgivable, right? And I know stories and you know stories. But like, if I don't love my brother, it hurts me. And it hurts me fundamentally. The last part of the sirat, the traverse that goes over Jahannam to the garden, is silatul rahim. It is the tie of kinship. You know, we pick our friends, right? And we pick beautiful friends. But we don't pick our mothers, we don't pick our fathers, we don't pick our aunts, we don't pick our uncles. We don't pick our cousins. Our families are chosen for us. And most of them, we love them infinitely. But there's always going to be some that are not easy, because that's part of the test that Allah gives us. So what if you become a person who, because of the brilliance of your heart and the goodness of your heart, you speak wise, amiable words, you know, that set things right. And Imam al-Ghazali will tell us about that and how to do it. So again, practice solitude, keep good company. Remember Abu Bakr, who put a pebble on his tongue? And you don't want to put a pebble on your tongue, but maybe you could buy a topaz, or you could buy a ruby, right? And then you'd be very careful. You don't want to swallow your ruby, and you don't want to spit it out, right? So let me take my ruby out of my mouth before I speak. Of course, if you did that, they would think it's very strange. Also, force yourself not to speak about certain things that don't concern you. And how difficult that is. Have you ever tried it? I know you have. How difficult it is. But wallahi, if you do it, you are a strong person. Accustom your tongue by things like these to obey you. And try to find the balance. And again, as we said last time, if you want to control the way you eat and the way you drink, and of course we don't fast for that reason, we fast for Allah, but fasting is such a beautiful thing to do. Sumu tasihhu, fast and be healthy. And fasting is amazing. And I remember when I became a Muslim, you think you'll be able to do this? I don't know. And I remember the first day I was very nervous, like I'm hungry and I'm thirsty. And then when you break the fast, you feel, I did it. It's like it's becoming happy, it's becoming different than it was from the fasting. That's really beautiful. And what does fasting do to you? Self-esteem. Gives you tremendous self-esteem. This is why fasting is so good for people, especially people who don't have self-esteem. You can fast. This means that you can control your impulses. Well, fasting is about food and drink and other things. But the fasting of speech is what? Dhikr. Dhikr. So try to preoccupy yourself with dhikr. And that's a way of speaking that is getting you a palace with every word you say. A miracle. فيها ما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت وما خطر على قلب بشر أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, that in the garden there is what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and has never occurred to the heart of a human being. And every word you say, because Allah is al-Ghani, Allah is self-sufficient, He has no need, and it means He can give you everything with no harm, with no difficulty. And that's the way He is. That is the way He is. So you want to use your tongue for dhikr, for admonition, for wisdom, and then you'll become an excellent person. Your heart will then help you. Your heart will be purified. Some people love to lie, right? I've lived in places, in unfortunately the Muslim world, where lying is so common. I went to one sheikh and I said, even good people in this country lie. And he said to me, الكذب عندهم كشرب الماء. And in fact, I even had one really good friend who was a sharif, and he was a good man, and he's an upright man, and I love him. But he doesn't always speak the truth. And one day I was very foolish. I said, it's not good to lie. And I told him the Prophet hated lying. Oh, was he angry at me. And it's like I had offended him to the core. And I was at his house, and then, we talked about other things, and we had some tea, and we forgot about that. And then a little bit later, my wife called. And he came to me with the phone. We didn't have cell phones in those days. He came to the phone, he said, it's your wife. Do I tell her you're here or not? I said, that's it, you see. I told you, Sidq. They speak the truth. What is the benefit of that? Then you know the truth when you see it. And you know the Sadiq when you see him. And when we lie, may Allah protect us from that, we don't know Sidq anymore. And we believe the most strange things. I could tell you stories that I know happened that you wouldn't probably believe. Of people lying, it's like they have no intellect whatsoever. But the answer is their hearts also are not good. So they actually find enjoyment in these falsehoods. So we ask Allah to protect our tongues and to give us golden tongues that speak golden speech from golden silence. So let's open now for questions. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Whoa.
Just take a 1 minute break, I'll switch batteries.
Okay, we're going to take a 1 minute break.
Inshallah, it's fine. And the upload, it said slow connection, so I cut it from Monday. And we're just using that.
I mean a German minute. Okay, we're ready, Doc.
Okay, so we got lots of questions today, and let's start with them. This is the case for me, and if I don't talk, I may hold grudges, and it's something I can't live with. What can I do to stop saying negative, hurtful things to the person bothering me? If I don't say anything, I feel like a hypocrite. So that's a very good question. It's actually, I think, more than one question. The general rule is that we try to not speak about all of the complaints that we have and all of the issues that we have. But one of the most important things in life, may Allah give us this, is to have a primary friend, or to have a person that you trust and you know you can trust, that you can speak to. And one of the things about a primary friend is that the primary friend is the one that you can tell everything to. And he or she will keep it a secret. And he or she will give you good advice. So it's true, sometimes we have to speak. Because sometimes also we are confronted with situations that are so complex that we don't know what to do. I'm like that too. And you're probably like that as well. This is the way human beings are. But the thing is that one of the greatest gifts in life is to have that primary friend, or that counselor. I thank God that I have more than one. And I know situations, even just a few months ago, where certain things were bothering me to such an extent that I had to tell one of these people that my heart is really heavy. My heart is, and even I tell the person what the issue is. And that person helped me. That person gave me really good advice. Who knows this? He and I. Nobody in the world knows that. You know it happened, but you don't know the details. So sometimes we have to have that. So here also, it's the question of judgment. The thing is, don't tell everybody. And that's often what we do. And some of us, we tell people that you shouldn't tell them this. Because first of all, they'll tell other people. They'll spread it. You know that they say, as-sirru, idha jawaza ithnain sha'a. You know, so the secret, when it goes beyond two, it spreads. And you don't want that to happen. There's no good that comes from that. So it's good to cultivate friends. It's good to find a primary friend. And to me, I know in my life, there have been times when I have actually complained to myself that I have no primary friend. But you can't tell them your problems, you know, but you need someone that you can. Of course, a spouse may be the one to do that. but sometimes the spouse is not appropriate. So this is something that you do. This makes you very intelligent. You know your friends. And it's very important. We don't want to be judgmental. And we don't want to have bad opinion. But one of the really valuable things in life is to be able to estimate people. And to know that this brother is good for such and such. This sister is good for such and such. This one is a leader. And this one's not a leader, but really good at maybe organization or administration or work or whatever it may be. It's really good to do that. And then also for your own good. Who can you trust that you can confide in? We are really poor when we don't have that. We're not poor if we don't have money. We're poor when we don't have friends we can trust. So that's very, very important. You have that friend that you can talk to, and he or she won't tell anybody. Okay, that's really precious, and we need that. But again, you want that person to be able to give you good counsel in return. And then they also say that sometimes when people bother you, and you can't stop saying negative and hurtful things, if I don't say anything, I feel like a hypocrite. Inshallah, we'll talk about this later. This is a different question. But we will see that there's certain instances, Imam al-Ghazali will tell us that, where it's not nice to be nice. And there are certain cases where you have to be firm, even with your own children. There's certain times, and I know that in the way we were brought up a long, long time ago, certain parents, especially the father or the father figures, as opposed to the mother. Mother's always telling you how much she loves you, and you can't make any mistakes and things like that. That's why you love to talk with your mother, right? But the father, and this is not always even true of mothers. Mothers are different. But the father figure, often, they wouldn't show much emotion, especially if you were doing something good. And that's because they don't want it to go to your head. Okay, so that's wise. In West Africa, the Mandinkas, who are people that I love, they're royal people, they were kings. And their language is a really beautiful language. And you can't speak about a person's, you can't speak profanities in their language. You can't talk about a person's mother or their father. They're very interesting people. And they sing, and their songs are very, very beautiful, very controlled. But they will say, make your child a king, and you will be the first to pay the taxes. Right? And they say, teach your child adab, so the world can live in peace. So, those are very wise words. And people who teach things like that, they don't want their children to be kings. Again, it's very important in the early part of life to let your children be happy. And we don't go around beating them and spanking them. I don't believe in that. But there is a time, especially after they're 7 years old, when you want to be a little bit firm, so that they become adults. And so that, they're not harmed by your excessive love for them. What is a good formula for dua to make me be quiet without changing my personality, because that would be a misguided effort, and the pretense may give me delusions of superhumanness. This is from a live stream listener. Types of dhikr may vary from person to person, but, and I'm not a specialist in that, I'm not especially good at that. But, for example, if you have something really important to say, let's say that you're going to an important meeting or a council or something like that, then it's good to say Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Maybe you can say it 10 times. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. And then you could say, Ya Quddus, O God who is holy and who is pure. Because this also purifies your heart. Ya Quddus. You could say that again, as many as you want, but you could say 10 times. Ya Quddus, Ya Quddus. And then you can say something like, Ya Latif, 10 times. And this, if you do it sincerely, as you would do it sincerely, you want to pay attention to it. You don't want to just say the words. This makes it easier for you to control your speech and to give good counsel. And there's other things you could do. Ya Salam. Salam is a word for God, the perfect God. Salam is God who has no defects whatsoever. So also you can use the word Ya Salam. You might do it 10 times before you speak. Ya Salam, Ya Salam, Ya Salam. So that you try to say something which is also sound and good. And there are many things that you can do, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. When someone says something negative about Islam, it is difficult for us to remain silent, as silence is seen as a form of weakness. Do you have any words of wisdom in terms of how to respond back or to remain silent? Of course, this is a situational thing, and depends on who the person is, what the situation is. The most important thing is never to lose your temper, and never to respond with excessive anger, because this will make it worse. And if you are able to think of something else that changes the topic or enables you to approach it indirectly, or humor, then that is extremely beneficial. Okay, some people are really good at that. But the thing is that you don't want to be forced into a discourse that you can't win. And if, may Allah bless the Muslims, may Allah give us, the ability to get our affairs together and to educate ourselves and our people. Our situation today in the whole world is generally not very happy. So people do things. They write outlandish statements. They use the cartoons. Maybe they insult the Blessed Prophet ﷺ. And so many of our people go wild. And so it's like, now you insulted the Prophet 1,000 times worse. So, we ask Allah to give us the ability to work together. And, Islam needs counsel. وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. So that when we have a difficult situation, it's very good if we have people we trust that we can talk about this problem with. And maybe we can find a really good answer. In England, for example, maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago, when there was a really strong attack on Islam, a lot of Muslims decided that in London, in one of the central parts of London, that they would just give people flowers. And they got these beautiful roses, maybe other flowers as well, and the woman would be wearing her scarf, and the man also would be dressed in a way that they can identify him as a Muslim, whether he dresses that way ordinarily or not, and they just came and gave people flowers. Okay, now to me that is a brilliant idea, because also what you want to do is to change the cognitive frame. The cognitive frame, or the paradigm, is the way people have been taught to think. Okay, so if you have a cognitive frame that Islam is a bad idea, okay, and that cognitive frame is being spread in the West today, or you have a cognitive frame that Muslims are terrorists, which they never were, okay, then you cannot win within that frame. You've got to be able to get out of it. Does that make sense? And you've got to be able to substitute something else. That's why, again, if you go back to this simple example of just giving flowers, that doesn't fit the cognitive frame. So even though you didn't tell them anything, you didn't tell them how beautiful the Prophet is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But nevertheless, you maneuvered them out of their cognitive frame because they think, well, maybe these people are not like I think they are. I remember also a brother, an American brother, African American from Baltimore in Maryland, who was also involved in Maryland politics, very intelligent. And I met him years ago, but there were problems that were going on in the United States at that time, because the media has been working on us a long time. It didn't start after 9/11. It was a long time before that. And there was a lot of prejudice against Muslims. And he told me that in my experience, he said, in Maryland, where he was working, he said that whenever you find a Jew or a Christian who has a Muslim friend or a Muslim colleague at work who is a good person, that they are hardly ever affected by what they hear. So this is another thing. Make friends. Be good. Be good to the person. And also, if a person says something to you about Islam, and they know you're a Muslim, and you are quiet, and you show that you don't agree, but you don't lose your temper, this also makes them rethink. Because they know that, well, you don't agree with that, do you? And you have something else to say, but you didn't say it. And as we said, silence is golden, and silence is Jama'ah. It is gatheredness, and silence is strength and power. So this also affects them. A dignity, and never lose your dignity. And of course, we have these wonderful men and women. You have them here in Egypt. You have them in all countries. In the United States, we have some whom Allah has given the gift to be able to speak beautifully in public. And especially to speak in situations where they're asked difficult questions, or where they can respond to really serious issues. And again, this person needs to smile. This person needs to be humorous if they can. Malcolm X, may Allah be pleased with him, he was the master of that. Malcolm X, who was an African American, who was put into the public eye. He didn't live very long. Allah have mercy on him. He was assassinated. He had many enemies. Because what he was doing was really pivotal. But Malcolm X, he was extremely intelligent. And they say he is the father of the soundbite. Because he was really good at that. He was really good at finding really terse things to say that people wouldn't forget. But Malcolm, one of the things about him, and I used to watch him as a young man, and I respected him tremendously because I knew that America. I grew up in the South, and the South was segregated. And I would watch Malcolm on television, and it's like, you are brave. Fortunately, I would come into Islam through him. At that time, I wasn't thinking. I was a young man. But after 5 years after he was killed, it was his autobiography that brought me into Islam. But I would watch him on television like, you are a brave man. Because I know they don't like you. And they don't like your people. And they don't think you are equal to them either. And yet you're smiling and you're humorous and you're brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So Malcolm was able to change things. Who's another good example of that? Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was so brilliant in the way he spoke. And that's why if we talk about civil rights in the United States, and we talk about the Voter Rights Act and these things that happened in 1965, you've got to also talk about Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. But Muhammad Ali, he's able to change things by the beauty of his personality. Of course, sometimes he was also a little bit arrogant. Like he would say that, I'm so fast, I can turn off the light and get into bed before it's dark. And he was a beautiful man too, and there's now a film that's come out that's put together by his family that shows how beautiful he was. When he was going to fight Joe Frazier, he was told, I think he got a letter, I didn't see this yet, I just heard about it, from a little boy who was dying of cancer. And he drove hours to visit that boy. And he told the boy, he said, look, I'm going to beat Joe Frazier, and you're going to beat cancer. And in any case, I don't think the boy lived. But then, this is in this film that's come out now, I've been told. And then he went back to the boy, and he said, you know, I beat Bill Frazier, with Joe Frazier, and you're going to beat cancer. And he said, I don't think so. But he said, when I go to God, I'm going to tell him that I'm thankful to him that I met people like you. So this is what we want to do, you know, and may Allah enable us to do that and think outside the box. That's why people say you've got to respond to all these criticisms. Okay, you're right, we do, but we don't have to just do that. Let's take the initiative. Let's do good things. Let's show a different face. And when you're responding to problems and questions, you usually are going to be trapped in their cognitive frame. You probably know that over the last maybe 40 years, in the United States of America, the right wing has become very powerful. And one of the ways they do that is by manipulating cognitive frames. There's a book that you could read about that if you're interested, which is easy to read, it's very short, and it's by a man called George Lakoff, Lakoff, and it's called Don't Think of an Elephant. Don't think of an elephant. So what are you thinking of now? An elephant, right? So he shows how the right wing, with its think tanks, has carefully manipulated cognitive frames, and that their opponents, whether they're liberal or whatever they may be, if they talk in those cognitive frames, they have got to lose. You know, so so George Lakoff is also telling them that don't speak their speech, don't fall into their traps. You know, if, for example, let's say that we're talking about this horrible thing of Muslims blowing themselves up and killing other people and doing things that they never should do, and they're not sane, okay? But if we use the word Islamic terrorism or Muslim terrorism, then immediately we played into the frame. It's like, you're not going to win. So again, we have to be honest about the situation that we face. And we have to be honest about extremism, but we have to be very careful about the words we use and how we use them. And think of all the things you can think of, like giving flowers and other things like that, because these are the things that really work, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay, you mentioned jihad has 3 elements. You said to strive through difficulties to gain something good. What are the other 2? Okay, so we said 3 elements. What are they? What are they? Who remembers? What is element number 1? Huh? Well, let's say something really good. Something really good. Like we gave the example of a baby, a child. We gave the example of knowledge, to be a doctor, to be a lawyer. So that's something good. Okay, that's something you want. That is an objective. And you call it a moral objective, and that's good. And then you have an obstacle before that, because it's not easy to have children, and it's not easy to raise children. That's an obstacle. And this will be, for women, the biggest test that they go through physically in all their lives. Right? Very difficult. Okay, so that's an obstacle. And then there are other things. You've got to get your family ready. You've got to do all the things you're doing. You've got to prepare. These are all obstacles. And of course, the husband and the family, they should be doing their role in that also. And so then you have the effort, which is the jihad, or the ijtihad, the juhd. The effort that is directed towards that obstacle. That's what mujahada or jihad means. Jahada hadha shay, he met it or she met it with effort to overcome it. And also, as you know in Arabic, when you use these forms that are fa'ala, then it means that you meet it with juhud And it meets you with what? Juhud. Just like going through school. How many sleepless nights? How many days of anxiety? The goal. And that's why also, we talk about the hadith. It's not a strong hadith, but it is a meaningful hadith. That we have returned from the lesser jihad for the greater jihad. And what is the greater jihad? Jihad mujahadatun nafs. And that's absolutely true. The most difficult thing for me to do is to get the best of myself and to bring out the best in myself. That's really difficult. The scholar who asked the new Muslim about his acts of disobedience, do we regard him as a scholar? He was an Egyptian. I shouldn't say that. Isn't that terrible? Isn't that terrible? Why did I say that? Astaghfirullah. But he was a scholar. That's what I meant to say. He was a scholar. I mean, he is a scholar. And I would say this was a mistake he made. Allah forgive him. But and in fact, he is a person who's done great good. So he is an Egyptian scholar and a real scholar. But he just made that mistake, and that was a long time ago. That was a long time ago, over 40 years ago. Mashallah. And this is why it's also important not to judge people by the mistakes they make, right? I'm sure he was very sorry that he'd even asked that question. I don't know what was in his mind when he did it, but we all do things like that. And how many Ramadans has he fasted since then? We live in a time where in order to get a job, get ahead, one needs to speak about themselves and promote themselves. How do we maintain silence without making dhulm on ourselves? There's a time and place for everything. Okay, this is part of the wisdom of Solomon according to the Bible. There's a time and place for everything under heaven. And when you're going for a job interview, then you have got to show to the person interviewing you that you are capable of doing the job. Okay, so this is what you've got to do. You did all these studies, you have this experience, you're able to do that. The important thing here is to be honest and to be humble and not to exaggerate. And in fact, if you do this in humility and you do it in honesty, and again, watch your words. Don't say anything more than you have to say. Who's going to get the interview? Who's going to win in the interview? It'll be you. And the person that goes there talking a whole lot and building themselves up and promoting themselves, they won't. If you come and you're very dignified and you've got your papers and he or she sees your paper and they know what you've done, you've got your career there, and yet you speak about yourself in a dignified way, and you don't go to excesses, you'll get the job. You'll be the one they respect. Usually that would be the case. And I've seen that in the past. I've seen that. I've seen interviews where people come in who are like consciously dignified, consciously speaking little about themselves, who are very well qualified. I've seen that. And the impression they make on the committee is amazing. Okay, so talking about acts of disobedience, wouldn't not talking about them sometimes be considered lying by omission? Well, what's a good example of lying by omission? Does anybody have an example of that? Lying by omission. Of course, there is a type of lying, which is lying by omission. We say in English, we damn a person with faint praise, right? He damned the person with faint praise. What does it mean? It's like, say, oh, brother so-and-so, he's so great. Yes, he's really good. He's extremely intelligent, right? He's a great scholar. So it's like, oh, then he's not, is he? Because you say, yes, indeed, he's a great scholar. So faint praise, which is like, yeah, he's a great scholar. It means you damned him by praising him. So that's probably a type of lying by omission. Maybe we could think of other things, definitely could. But the thing is that your acts of disobedience, there's certain things that are appropriate to say, and there's certain things that are not. And we know in Islam, for example, great awliya, who in one case was a highway robber. And the highway robber turned into a great saint. And he told people, I was once a highway robber, but I became a great saint. And I could tell you other examples. I know of a great sheikh in Morocco, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Habib, may Allah be pleased with him, and his driver died. And they couldn't find him another driver. And they brought him a man. I won't even tell you the full story about this man, but this man is, first of all, a drunkard, and he did other things. And they said that this is the only one they could find. He is a driver. And so Sheikh Muhammad al-Habib said, I'd like you to be my driver, and I'd like you to take me wherever I would go. And he said, and I'd like to ask you, please don't drink when you're driving, because I can't stand the smell of alcohol. In any case, this man was totally reformed by that, because he, from the very beginning, it's like, look, I am not worthy to drive you. And so the fact that he was accepted, meant that he totally changed. Although it wasn't like in one day, it took some time. But ultimately, he became a totally different person. And many people say that he became one of the greatest of all the followers of that sheikh. So again, we need to know about him. And even though I'm not going to tell you the whole story because I don't want to do that, not pleasant to me, but he became a really good person. And again, Islam is merciful. One of the greatest people that I ever knew in my life was a great sheikh who was my principal sheikh for 19 years. His name was Muhammad Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him. And he was really solid in Islamic law. He knew fiqh through and through. He was extremely dignified. He was a poor man. He was a refugee in Jeddah. He was a refugee from Eritrea. And he was a saint, in my belief. He was a saint. I loved him. I loved to keep his company. He could be extremely hard on me. And he might not talk to me, by the way, because when I was with him, golden silence. It's like, I could sit with him for 6 hours, and all we did was dhikr. But he wouldn't talk to me. It's almost like he didn't like me. He could be very hard on me. And I needed to have somebody to be hard on me. In fact, he even sent me to another person to teach me, because the relationship between me and him was such that I held him in such awe that I couldn't ask him certain questions, even. And sometimes I would be sitting at his house, nighttime, and the door would have a knock, and you go to the door. This happened several times. And you'd open the door, and there'd be an Eritrean. Most of the people that came to him were Eritreans. He's an Eritrean. And sometimes the Eritrean who comes is really, really looks bad. Sometimes you could smell alcohol on them. You could look at him and say that this man never prays. I bet he doesn't even know Fatiha. And I bet he's not good to his wife. I bet he's probably not good to his children. And you take that man to the sheikh, and the Eritreans, they like to give you milk. That's one of the main things. They live on milk. They love milk. And they put sugar in the milk. And so he would bring the milk, and he would sit in front of the man, and he would pour the milk, and he would be giving him the sugar and looking at him and smiling. It's like, why don't you treat me like that, right? And he would treat the man as if he were the king. or as if he were the greatest saint, and he wouldn't say a thing about him, like, you're a bad person, you don't pray, you don't fast. Okay, that is the sunnah of the Prophet, because we're not here to damn people. We are not, and you know, we have people that they love to do takfir. Well, this man, we could probably easily do takfir. His belief is probably wrong, he's probably not praying, he probably does all sorts of other things, and never a word. You know why? Because he came to you, and you receive him as a host, and he's a guest, and you want him to come back, and you want him to get better, and you want him, this is Islam. This is the way of the Prophet. And Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, he said that if what holds another person to me is nothing more than a thread, I won't be the one to cut it. And we have today people that just want to cut you off, you know, at the least offense. Let's see here. How is the time? Are we okay? Okay, so let's see. So he said, I have a problem that my mother and sister don't keep my secrets, although I have to tell them important things about me. Silatul Rahim, what do I do? Don't speak to them about my things. That's not an easy question. But you know, there's certain things that we want to keep to ourselves. And those things, if they are the kind of thing that your mother has to know, then that would be her right to know. But presumably that wouldn't be the kind of thing that needs to be kept a secret. And, you know, usually the things that, again, we don't keep secrets because we want to deceive people. We don't keep secrets because we want to manipulate people. Some people do. But that's not why we keep secrets. And, you know, as we said last time, qulubul ahrar, quburul asrar. If you're a lawyer, can you be a lawyer if you can't keep confidentiality? Absolutely not. This is first requirement. And the same thing's true of a doctor. If you go to the doctor has got to be trained in keeping confidentiality. That may differ from one country to another, but in our country, you know, the doctor has to be very careful about giving out any information about you that you didn't authorize. So this is very, very important. And I think that, you know, it's very important to make your mother happy. It's very important to be good to her. It's very important to be good to your sister. But, you know, if they are people who will tell the whole world. I mean, I love my mother. My mother was really good to me. My mother didn't keep secrets. And I was the apple of her eye. And I'm glad I was. But, I mean, it was embarrassing, even if we'd go to restaurants. If my mother saw a friend, she'd say, this is my son, and he does this, and he does that, and he knows this, and I said, oh my God. You know, it's like, that's the way she was. And, you know, Allah have mercy on her. I mean, she was a loving mother. But I knew also that maybe there's certain things that I'm not going to tell her, you know, because she'll tell the world, and she doesn't mean any harm. In Spanish, you know, they have an expression in South America, no necesita abuela, you know, he doesn't need a grandmother. You know, they say that for a person who, as we say, blows his own horn. I am this, I am that. So they, no necesita abuela. He doesn't need a grandmother, because that's what grandmothers do. They say, oh, my grandson, he's this. My mother was like that too. She's always talking about her son. And, you know, so that makes me happy. But the thing is that there might be certain things that, you know, we don't want to say. Something that comes to mind, and I think we should probably close here, but, you know, history is full of tragedies. And, may Allah always bring a good end. May Allah protect this blessed land, these good people, and, give you a brilliant future, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, and let you overcome all difficulties. But these are difficult times. And, it happens that the Muslim world, the Arab world in particular, is so strategic geopolitically that nobody leaves us alone. That's the sad thing. And, you probably know a lot about that, and other people can tell you about things like that. If you look at countries like Afghanistan or Pakistan, I mean, those countries, Waziristan in Pakistan, is poor, but it's got uranium. It's also got other valuable natural resources. It is awash in money. Where does that money come from? Well, you can guess. I'm not going to tell you where it comes from, but it comes from this group, this country, that country. You might not even expect that some of the countries give the money you do. So it's not a shock that certain things are happening. Very difficult. That's the world that we live in today. Very few people leave us alone. I love very much the country called the Gambia, the smallest country in Africa. It's a beautiful little country. The country to the south, west of it is Guinea-Bissau. And Guinea-Bissau has uranium. So that means that Guinea-Bissau is the one that gets the attention. And it's not always very good. Gambia doesn't have uranium, so they leave it alone, and I'm glad they do. I wish they would leave Guinea-Bissau alone also, because I like these countries, and the people there, I think, are beautiful people, very simple people. So we live in a difficult world, and that reminds me, I'll tell you a couple of stories. Moscow. You know that in Red Square there is St. Basil's Basilica. You might not know the name, you've all seen it. It's that basilica in Red Square that's got the funny domes, the funky domes. Look like they come from Dr. Seuss's Disneyland. Right? Look at the colors. Where did those come from? That was a mosque. That was the great mosque of Kazan on the Middle Volga, which belonged to the Golden Horde. The Golden Horde were Tatar and Mongol Muslims. They were very powerful. They were very intelligent. And they ruled Russia for 250 years. And that's a very important part of history. So Ivan the Terrible, when he begins the Russian Empire, he conquers the Upper Volga, the Middle Volga, and he destroyed all the mosques. And he forced all the Muslims to be Christians. That's what he did. He took the great mosque in Kazan and he took it apart. And by bull cart, he had it taken to Moscow, and then he had Muslim architects build it as a basilica. So the mosque didn't look like that. It looked like a mosque. You would recognize it. But those are its bricks, those are its tiles, those are its domes. And also look at the cultural brilliance of these people who got to see the Tatars. Who are these people? And it was a beautiful trip. And when I went to Kazan, I saw wonderful imams. And they had a museum of Islam. And so I asked one of the imams in Arabic, I said, is it true, as I have heard and read, been told that by great scholars, that St. Basil's Basilica was once the Grand Mosque of Kazan? What do you think he said? Because what he said was very wise. And it's like this lesson we talk about today. What do you think he said?
What do you think?
That's very good. But that wouldn't be good enough, because I say, yes. I know it is, and he knows it is. What did he say? He said, we don't like to talk about that. And then I thought, my God, you are smarter than I am. And may I never forget this lesson. We don't like to talk about that. You see, and why? Superfluous speech. Because what is the benefit that will come from that? Those are bricks. Those are stones. We've got now a new mosque. And he said, if we talk about this, how can we call the Russians to Islam? So I said, may I never forget this lesson. I love Spain and Portugal. I love Al-Andalus. Alhamdulillah, I've been able to spend years there. And we have a zawiyah there every year. This year it will be August the 2nd to August the 11th, I think. And our topic is Beauty, the Splendor of Truth. And you're welcome to come. But Al-Andalus is just, I love it. And I have a feeling of how great it was. You do too. But like, I've seen it. And it actually breaks my heart. Because I know what happened there. And I know how that was destroyed. And, you know, this is hard to deal with. And it's a problem with Spanish and Portuguese who become Muslims, because it's like you have to then hold them in, because it's like, this is what we had, and this was destroyed and destroyed that way. And of course, naturally you want vengeance. But for what? The people who did that are gone. And the people who are here today are not they're not the criminals. And in fact, they're mixed with your blood anyway. You know, and there was a study done of the Portuguese by the Mormons, who like to talk about genealogy. They use DNA. They found that 60% of the Portuguese north of Lisbon have Israelite Hebrew blood. 80% of the Portuguese south of Lisbon have Arab blood. 80%. They said, let's shelf this study. This is not what we expected to find. You know, so in any case, one of the great horrors in history, and I really, for decades, it's like I couldn't deal with this, is the Inquisition. And the Inquisition forced millions of Muslims in Portugal and Spain to be Christians despite their will, and change their names, and they could not use Arabic. Now, so this is something that like we don't, it's maybe better that we have to talk about it, but let's be very careful how we do that, because we want it to be beneficial. We don't want it to be harmful, right? And this is another thing. We have to make sure that Spanish and all other people in situations like this never seek revenge, because that's not for you. You know, the criminals are gone. But the thing is that let's go back to that, because one of the amazing things was that the Moriscos, who were these Christians who had been forcefully converted to Christianity. Morisco means little more, little Moor, little Moro, little Muslim. They're not Muslims anymore, they're Christians. But they could not teach Islam, they could not teach Arabic. They are watched by the Inquisition day and night. So there, going back to our question, mothers and fathers developed a particular culture. They hid Islam away for well over 100 years. Some people would say even to the age of Franco. And the way they would do that is that they test their children. And they test the mother and father as well. But like, can he keep a secret? So they would go to a boy and they tell him a secret, like, and a true secret, but like maybe there's candy in the kitchen. And then he tells he said, don't tell anybody. But then he tells the brother or the sister, his friend. So they do that many times, but they say he can't keep a secret. Therefore, he can't be taught anything. He can't be taught Islam. He cannot be taught his genealogy, which is probably Arab, could be Berber. He cannot be taught Arabic, because if he reveals that secret, the whole family dies. So this is the way they did. And for that reason, in their families, they had to always see who can keep the secret. The person who could keep the secret, we have a lot of evidence for this, then he might be taught, or she, everything. Arabic, Islam, and we have manuscripts that are about things like this, that are amazing. Okay, so for that reason, I mean, this is we didn't have to answer the question with that example, but it's like sometimes there are certain things that even in your family, if you can't keep it a secret, then you don't have to tell it to everybody. In their case, it was a matter of life and death, and the survival of a very special culture. I learned that when I was still a graduate student. I had one more year to go in my PhD. I was doing my research, and I came across an article in a Western journal about the Moriscos, and that just really amazed me. And I wrote a paper about it in Arabic, and a person helped me to write it in Arabic. My Arabic wasn't very good in those days. And I went to Tunisia. This was this was about a year later. I was a professor by that time. And I was invited to go to Tunisia. I went to Tunisia, and I was in a mosque in Tunis. And it happened that there was a man having a class in the mosque, and he knew me. I was sitting up on the balcony. And he said, "You've got to come down and speak." And I was like, I couldn't speak irtijalan. My Arabic's not that good, irtijalan. But in those days it was terrible. So I said, I can't do that. But I do have a paper I could read. So if you will let me do that, I'll be happy to do it. So he said, okay. And then he told everybody, we're going to meet in such and such a mosque. This was in March or April. It was very cold in Tunisia. And he said, we're going to have you speak in this mosque. And so I went to the mosque. They were very nice. I read my speech about the Moriscos. Then after the speech, a lot of Tunisian youths, they come up to me and they said, do you know who we are? And it's like, well, Tunisians? They said, we are Moriscos. That's true. I didn't know that, yeah. Because Tunisia was one of the main places to which the Moriscos went. And then they had a big burnous. It was cold. And they put it around me, so that was one of the days of heaven. And they said, we are the Moriscos. They said, we still have the keys to our houses. And then I had the great honor to meet many of them. One of my beloved scholars I met in Tunisia that year, and then we were friends until he passed away, was Shaykh Shadri an-Naifa. He was a great Maliki scholar. He was one of those two. Shaykh Abdul Fattah Moro, he was another one of those. And so we have amazing things in our history. And but we need to learn when to speak, when not to speak. And who to talk to and who not to talk to. Not to hurt people, not to manipulate people, but inshallah, to get maximum benefit and minimize harm.